Welcome back to the Are You Effing Kidding Me podcast. Kim Whaley, a law professor, author of Pardon Power, How the Pardon System Works and Why. Kim, my friend, who has been one of the greatest gifts out of this whole craziness because I met you. How are you? And pardons are hot right now.
Yes. Well, right back at you. This is one of the definite blessings of an otherwise dark period in American history and a lot of people's lives. And unfortunately, it's going to roll forward, and we'll keep talking about it and educating people about what's going on. And I think the pardon power is one of those things that is deeply, deeply misunderstood. I wrote the book. It came out in September in part because nobody had written a book about it. It's just this relic of a monarchy that has just been sleepily humming along. It's been abused by prior presidents. Donald Trump, it was a pardon palooza of corruption, and it barely got a bylines and on major newspapers. I mean, no one really discussed it, and now people, I think for the most part, at least the majority of commentators, including Democrats, are hammering Joe Biden for somehow undermining the rule of law when this is in the Constitution and it's completely within his authority. And the Supreme Court even underscored that last summer. So, it's in the Constitution. And like I argue in the book, I don't think it should be. I think we need to change it. But it's kind of hard to pick on him for doing what he's 100% constitutionally allowed to do. So I don't get why people are so upset about it.
Yeah, I mean, the hypocrisy really, it's staggering because again, we talked about the fact that Donald Trump has said many, many times when he's not calling them heroes and warriors that he intends to pardon the January 6th attackers. So that's, I mean, he's already used again the pardon. To your point, we could talk about the people that he's pardoned because some of them are some of the worst dudes on the planet. One of them is the future ambassador to France, but we can talk about
Right.
that too. But let's first unpack this pardon, Joe Biden's pardon of his son Hunter. There's lots of things to unpack as to the implications of it, but also you said the constitutionality of it, and then the idea, because one of the things they're hammering him on hardest is, but he said he wasn't going to do that, and then
Right.
of course you add, no one's counting other than the intelligent people in the room like you, thank God, that then he said he was going to put Kash Patel at the head of the FBI, and Kash has a whole addendum in his book about the people he's going to go after, and one of them is Hunter Biden. So yeah, let's unpack what's in the pardon first.
Okay. So, yeah, Joe Biden was asked many times, will you pardon your son? And he said no. Um, just like Donald Trump said, I had nothing to do with Project 2025. And now he's putting those folks,
Good point.
proposing to put him in his cabinet. And I say that because both of them were running for president, and there's been, decades of history where people run on campaign promises and they don't follow through. Read my lips, no more taxes. That was the senior George H.W. Bush. I mean,
Mexico didn't pay for the
there's
wall.
this, pardon?
Mexico did not pay for the wall.
My Mexican, so that's what that is. And Joe Biden's not going to be president. Joe Biden's political career is over. So that's that piece. I think people are also upset somehow that it's hypocritical because he has held himself up as a rule of law guy. And that gets to my other point. This is not a violation of the rule of law. I mean, it's unseemly because pardons let you pick and choose winners and losers, and presidents can do it on whatever basis they want. There is no fairness, there's no process, there's no judicial review, there's no appeal, there's nothing. You can lobby for pardons. In theory, after the Supreme Court's decision this summer, you can sell pardons to the highest bidder. The court made really clear that you can commit crimes using a core power, and pardon is core in Article 2 of the Constitution. So what is this about? Under Donald Trump, an investigation was opened in Delaware into Hunter Biden under Donald Trump's Department of Justice. Joe Biden, of course, became president, did not shut that investigation down. He could have done that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was his constitutional prerogative and power. It would have been politically really problematic and unprecedented and arguably destructive to the rule of law. He didn't do it. He let it go. He even let his attorney general appoint a special counsel. They ultimately indicted him in Delaware for checking a box on an application to purchase a handgun that asked if he had a drug addiction, and he denied it. So he lied on an application for a gun when he was in the throes of an addiction because his brother Bo had died of brain cancer. So he relapsed. He is an addict. And he possessed that gun for 11 days.
Mhm.
A jury convicted him on that. Lindsey Graham, Eric Holder, Trey Gowdy, like many people have said, including Republicans, no normal regular person would have been prosecuted for something like that. That was because he was the president's son. It's not so much is there a crime here, but let's find a crime.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I worked on the Whitewater investigation under Ken Starr. That was the energy with the Clintons. I can say from my personal experience, because of the way that office was set up, it was let's see if we can find a crime, not with a regular prosecutor where you see all kinds of potential crimes and you pick and choose the ones that you can win that are the most serious. That's what happens. The police officer doesn't pull over everyone who's speeding. They pull over the ones they think are particularly egregious. That's what you do as a prosecutor. The second case was out of California, and that was for a set number of years. He made some misstatements on his tax returns to the tune of $1.4 million. He paid it all back with interest. This was also during this addiction. And I think the defense was, listen, I was spiraling out of control, and yeah, I didn't pay my taxes. Roger Stone, $2 million of unpaid taxes, no indictment of Roger Stone. So some would say this is also one of those things, it's in the single digits, maybe, or maybe low double digits, the number of people in that tax bracket that are audited. Now, were these crimes? Yes, they were crimes. He pled guilty to that second one. Joe Biden said, I'm not going to pardon him. He turned out pardoning him. What I've argued this week is that given that Donald Trump was elected, and given that Donald Trump has pledged to use the Justice Department as an arm of political vengeance and retribution, not as a place to ensure the rule of law and that justice is upheld, Biden could have changed his mind and said, whoa, I'm not putting my son into the Roman Colosseum to be torn apart by wolves. And he did issue a very broad pardon, similar to the one that President Ford gave Richard Nixon. It wasn't just the crimes for which he pled guilty or was convicted. It was for any crimes within a given time period. And I think that's because he wants to insulate or immunize his son from political retribution by the likes of Kesh Patel and Pam Bondi and others. It's not unprecedented. Again, Richard Nixon did it, but he's getting hammered for the breadth of that pardon as well. Yeah. Some people have said, well, that was also the time that he was on the board of Burisma in Ukraine, and he got these nepotistic goodies from his dad. My response to that is he was investigated, and they did not find anything to charge him. The United States Congress investigated him, did not find anything. And let's face it, Joe, lots of rich, powerful, famous people in and out of government give goodies or, get goodies if they're connected to rich and powerful people. This is not just the Biden family. Right. It's anyone in Hollywood. It's anyone, with power in Washington. It's any heavy duty banker in New York. I mean, that's just unfortunately how capitalistic structure works.
Yeah, I mean, and the nepotism component to that is just too rich. It's like, really, we're going to talk about nepotism. Meanwhile, Jared Kushner left the White House was in the White House without the ability to get a security clearance, and it didn't seem to matter, and left the White House $2 billion richer. But
from the Saudis, right?
From the Saudis, right? And his father, speaking again of pardons, his father, who is, if Chris Christie thinks you're loathsome, you're loathsome. Okay. Like his father, not a great dude, right? His father was pardoned by Donald Trump. His father set his own brother-in-law up with a prostitute and then had it recorded so he could show his sister the video to hopefully encourage or dissuade them, actually dissuade them from testifying against him for crimes that he committed. Essentially, that's the crux of what he did,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it was tax crimes, it was witness tampering, it was federal election crimes, and to your point, Chris Christie, New Jersey governor, was U.S. Attorney of the state of New Jersey at the time, said they were some of the most, quote, disgusting crimes he ever prosecuted.
Right.
And
So,
now he's up for ambassador to France, and that was also 100% within Donald Trump's authority.
right.
But it barely got a blip. I guess maybe it's a credit to Joe Biden that people expect more integrity of Joe Biden and Democrats than they do of Republicans. It's just a sad state of affairs where we're heading. We're heading in integrity wasteland. I mean, that's where we're going.
it, it it's so true because at that point you just made about Joe Biden is so that's the thing I struggle with is because it's like they're saying now that he's handed Trump so ironic a playbook for for misuse or abuse of the pardon power and it's like really first of all again that speaks to people holding Joe Biden just like they did with Kamala to this completely different standard where he does one for his son and it just somehow we're just not going to talk about the fact that Donald Trump has first of all given it to his friends sold it allegedly but also is planning on using it for the worst people on the planet again but when it comes to Biden, it's like, because he has this broad power now, thanks to SCOTUS, thanks to this like immunity thing, a whole lot of people could make the argument that Donald Trump gave him a playbook for how you sort of like don't with color within the lines of democracy and say, you know what, I'm going to suspend the normal rule of law. I mean, democracy is going to go be on hold for a little bit so we can make sure to protect our country from this monster that is Donald Trump. And Joe Biden could conceivably be like, well, this is an executive action. This is within my right as president. Look what the Supreme Court said. Obviously, he's not going to do that because he's a steward of democracy. But in some magical unicorn fairy tale land, you're like, well, I mean, there's an argument to be made for
Well,
all of it.
I mean, I think the statement that he issued along with the pardon wasn't helpful, where he said it was a political a political choice, and went after his own Justice Department. I mean, he had the authority to stop the investigation himself. So that is giving that does create this impression that special counsels are political, and it does give talking points and blurs the lines for Donald Trump to say his conviction in Manhattan on 34 counts was political, because that was really not one that, you know, someone other than Donald Trump would have been prosecuted for. But I would argue he was president. President
Mhm.
should be held to a higher standard, not a lower standard. Hunter Biden was never president, right? So I do think that he could have just issued the pardon and kept his mouth shut. Presidents are not required to justify their pardons, and that did muddy the waters, I think, politically, and maybe for the rule of law going forward. That now everything is a political prosecution, but maybe it's good because they will be political prosecutions come January 20th.
Yeah.
I want to say one thing though, Joe, about the pardon power, just so people can be clear. You can do it for any reason. That doesn't mean you should, and I'm not
Mhm.
endorsing that.
Yeah.
The two things that I think are bad reasons for pardons are, one, if you know the person's dangerous and is going to turn around and commit more crimes. There's a guy by the name of Jamie Davidson, who was his sentence was commuted by Donald Trump, and he was convicted in the spring of this year of assaulting his wife.
Mm.
So that's an example probably of a improvidently granted pardon because that person went out and committed crimes. And I think that's the problem with the January 6 folks. Are they
Mhm.
going to retaliate against the Capitol police officers? Are they going to start marching themselves into the United States Congress and harassing Democrats? I know from anecdotally, I've talked to people who are related to Capitol police officers who those folks are worried about their safety. I've talked to people who work on the Hill. They're worried. So that would not be an okay pardon. That's number one. The other kind of pardon I think are problematic are self pardons that help you, president, evade justice.
Mhm.
So that is pardoning folks like Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Steve Bannon, um, uh, pardoning people to silence them so they can't testify against you. Arguably, George H.W. Bush did this with the Iran Contra witnesses, pardoned them, shut that investigation down against him. And I would say maybe the third one is enrichment, pardons that you're pardoning someone because they're going to give you a bunch of money. So that's full on bribery, corruption. Bill Clinton was criticized for pardoning Mark Rich, a financier who gave a lot of money to Clinton interests. And, there are a number of Trump pardons that you could also argue were quid pro quo pardons. They're all legal, I think, certainly under the immunity decision. Joe Biden's pardon of his son doesn't fall into any of those categories. No one's worried Hunter Biden's going to run around and start committing more crimes. No one's worried that this pardon is somehow enriching Joe Biden in some way that is antithetical to the rule of law or going to corrupt the White House. It's none of those things. This is a man wanting to protect his one remaining son. And I just want to add this too, and I know you know this, Joe, because my kids didn't know this when this came up yesterday. Joe Biden lost his first wife and daughter in a tragic car accident when they were little. His sons were in the hospital. He then, for years, commuted on the train from Delaware to Washington and took care of those boys.
Mm-hmm.
And then he sent his son Beau went to Iraq and was exposed to burn pits and got brain cancer and died of brain cancer. He's in the twilight of his life. They've already gone through the ringer as a family. He's committed his whole life to public service. People might not like him politically, but he did. He could have been making a lot of money doing other things. Public service is still noble to some degree. I mean, in the early years, he was president. Can you blame him for wanting to retire and not have his son plastered all over the place? And but let's not forget too, Republicans in the House of Representatives made public photos of him during one of his benders, Hunter Biden, and showed his genitalia publicly when this person was suffering. And my mother had an addiction problem, died of addiction. That is not a joke. Right. That is a serious, serious tragedy for a family to go through. Oh. And to not have compassion for that, and now I'll get off my soapbox. I know you agree with me, Joe.
Yeah. No, worse than that. If the hypocrisy of that we can go into all day, but not the lack of compassion, but the exploitation too. Because again, like you said, if you've been connected to addiction, you understand the toll that it takes on the family and on the individual, but you also understand that what happens to that individual so often is that they lose themselves completely. They become the addiction. They're no longer the person you loved. It's all inhabited by this addiction, and they would never do most of the things that they do in the throes of addiction because that's not who they are, but it's not them that's leading the charge there, and because Hunter's been through it and relapsed and been through it, and he's okay at the moment, knock on wood. As a parent, as a sibling, I lived in perpetual fear of my brother and my mother, but my brother succumbing to addiction, which he ultimately, unfortunately, did. But I lived in perpetual fear of that call, and it came. But as a parent who's lost, like you said, so much already, has known grief in a way I can't even fathom, when looking at your last living son and knowing the demons he's battled and beaten, not forever, but every day, and to know what they're promising to do, and that it is limitless, especially when you're talking about again, an office that now has sort of all the guardrails are gone thanks to the Supreme Court. Who knows what Donald Trump would do? We know what he tried to do the last time, and we know there were grown-ups in the room to sort of stop him. That's not going to exist anymore. I mean, you made a comment, I was joking earlier, but about the Coliseum, and honest to God, I know I get crazy about stuff, but in my head, I'm like, I could see him asking, can we flood, the stadium where the Washington football team plays and see if we can use, these illegal migrants or whatever to battle each other and then we could put Hunter in charge of one of the ships. I know that sounds insane, but we're also talking about a person who calls the people we watched attack our Capitol patriots and warriors and heroes, and he plans to pardon them, which is incredibly unpopular. But I want to go back to one thing you said too about the pardons, because he pardoned people like Steve Bannon, who he knew would go back and commit more crimes, and I think has, because I think he's charged with other crimes in addition to the one where he did not comply with the subpoena. But Bannon is a great example. Bannon, Roger Stone, etc., Michael Flynn. I mean, this is all of those pardons were in interests that were not to, because they wouldn't do these things again. These are people who would 1000% do and will and have probably.
Yeah, and again, it's the double standard. I want to add one other thing to the Hunter Biden calculus, and that is, he faced 17 to 25 years on those charges. He
Mm.
was to be sentenced pretty soon. He didn't have priors. He was the president's son, so who knows what the judges would have done. But if he had been remanded to federal custody and actually had gotten a prison sentence, Donald Trump would be at the apex of the Bureau of Prisons. Donald Trump would be have power over Joe Biden's son's day-to-day life in prison. I mean, it's just chilling. And, I, I'll just quote my friend and colleague, or refer to my friend and colleague Asha Rangappa. She's also at ABC News, but she was with the FBI and she's now at Yale. I mean, she's publicly stated that she has concerns that this Trump administration will manufacture evidence,
Mhm.
destroy evidence. Now, people say, because in response to this, oh, come on, he won't really do those things. But as you point out, he tried to do it under Jeff Sessions. He tried to do it under Bill Barr. And those folks said no. He wanted to use the Justice Department as his retribution arm, and those folks said no. He, as you mentioned, Kesh Patel, head of the proposed head of the FBI, has an enemies list. He has an enemies list, and it's just insanity to think that he's not going to follow through on what he tried to do the last time, what he's now more empowered to do, and he has a longer list of grievances. I guess it's a nice thing with human nature that
Mm.
folks look on the bright side and there's this normalcy bias. You and I have been through enough in our lives. I just can't. I look at steely-eyed the truth. This is
Mhm.
staring us down, and
Mhm.
the hysteria over Joe Biden's pardon of his son. It's almost like this reaction, this allergy to really facing the truth of what we've gotten ourselves into. And it's almost like Joe Biden's pardon quietly acknowledged the truth.
Right.
The sitting president knows where we're headed. We're headed over a cliff. And it's hard to witness that Joe Biden, by pardoning his son, is tacitly saying the hard thing out loud, which
Mm.
is that we're heading for a danger zone. And it's unfortunate, but you and I can have this conversation in a few months, assuming that we're not somehow being investigated for speaking out, notwithstanding our First Amendment rights. And we'll look in hindsight and see if we were right or wrong, Joe. I don't know. I hope we're wrong.
I hope we're wrong too. And it does feel like when Joe Biden, right, like lifetime steward of democracy, public servant, feels like he's going every man for himself right now, folks. Like what's coming, you need to take care of your own. You need to take care of yourself, get your own house in order, uh, do whatever it takes. Do whatever it takes. I mean, not he won't do whatever it takes because he won't say, "Oh, I'm canceling the election. We're reversing it. I'm just going to give it to Kamala." But it
Or
is
arrest Donald Trump. I mean, or
right,
have him executed. I mean,
right.
honestly, that the Supreme Court gave him the authority to have Donald Trump executed tomorrow. And there's nothing anybody could do if Joe Biden did that.
And no, and there's absolutely nothing potentially stopping Donald Trump from trying to do the same, right? Like saying
Correct.
Joe Biden, he's over. They won, and they're all still and they're angrier than ever. But they're also still talking about now we need to find a way around this pardon, and we need to find a way. Now Joe Biden's committed a real crime, and now you have to go after him, and you have to make sure to arrest him. And it's like there's very little that really would Trump would be like, well, I can't do that because we talk about the mechanisms in place, the guardrails in place, the founder's vision for these things, including the pardon, but all of it. What is the mechanism in place? Is it just we the people? Honestly, like we're looking at South Korea, are we the bulwark against the truly worst of it because there are no mechanisms in a government to really stop, now that the Supreme Court especially, but they really stop Trump from basically doing whatever he wants, essentially, right?
That's a really great question. I think the top one, which we've talked about before the election, is you got to make sure you hire people in for the White House that have an internal compass and a break that will have their own sense of integrity and their own value system. And that's why people are mad at Joe Biden, because we all know he has that, and we all know Donald Trump does not, right?
Yeah.
So that you're right, that is the primary guardrail now, and it's a joke. No one's even making the argument that Donald Trump has self control. Now, other things. So, can he fire the entire federal workforce? No. There are laws in place that he would have to undo, and that I think courts would uphold. But you're also seeing Elon Musk bully these folks on X, right? Career federal employees that just do their job and go home and take care of their kids, and they're not political, and now they're being doxxed by this billionaire who's the shadow government already of a never elected. So do you scare them into quitting? Maybe. I mean, so there's that. We've got states. So states have their own government. And so at the state level, we've seen some governors saying, well, I'm going to fight back. There's state militias. I mean, we don't want to get into sort of, to your point, people coming out into the streets, but there's some authority that could push back on some of that. I mean, of course, Donald Trump has the military. You're not allowed easily to use the military on domestic folks, but there's a big exception in the law, Joe, that he could invoke, and it's pretty vague
The
to
insurrection
justify
clause
using the
thing?
military. I'm sorry, the
The
Insurrection
insurrection
Act.
clause? Yeah, insurrection
Yeah,
act.
so there's a Posse Comitatus Act that says you can't use the military on domestic civilians. But then there's this Insurrection Act that's basically an exception if he can say there's, a need for it effectively. He can gin up an excuse, he can do it. So there's that. I think people maybe need to wake up and smell the coffee, which we're not doing collectively,
Mm.
and then we'll see when people like, and you say in South Korea, what happened with the coup and the response to the coup. I mean, will people wake up and come together and realize, yikes, this is serious. It's not just people like Kim and Joe that are, sounding an alarm and exaggerating and making me stressed out. And I don't want to listen to it because that makes me stressed and I just don't believe it'll happen. So I'm
Right,
just going to post my pictures from Bermuda on Facebook, right?
right,
And
right.
do my Black Friday shopping and ho 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 and fa la 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 la. I mean, yeah,
Yeah. It's easier to live in a delusion when your reality isn't yet like upon you. So they're in this sweet spot right now where they've disassociated themselves from the actual reality of what Donald Trump did and was. January 6th itself has been completely revised and whitewashed. Now I almost posted it today because one of my trolls was like, we should make January 6th a holiday. And this is where we are. But
this
when
is
that
where we are. We that
yeah.
might happen. That could very well
Well,
happen.
I 1000% here's what I see. And again, I know I go there, but like I could see because Trump, remember his fixation with those patriotic parades because Macron had this, they do that in France, and he's like, I want one. And there was a whole thing where he was going to have tanks going down, in Washington,
Right.
D.C. And there's no chance on earth he has abandoned that idea. So I could see him having that and having the J6ers like I don't I hate calling them that on the tanks, like waving like a ticker tape parade, like, oh, look, here comes Enrique Tario. Hey, Enrique, how's it going up there on the tank? Oh, which American citizen who, celebrated your arrest are you going after today? But like, I know that sounds again, but some of it,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, think about it from a psychological standpoint, right? I mean, he does what's best for himself and what makes him feel good. What makes him feel good is adoration,
Hmm.
devotion, loyalty,
Hmm.
slavish reverence to him.
Yep.
So that's what makes his brain feel good. That's what makes him feel okay about being in the world. And I don't know him obviously personally,
Yeah.
and I'm not a psychologist to be clear, but I think that that's we all have our things that, for me it's my dogs or whatever, or going
Yeah.
for a walk, or you have your coffee in the morning. I mean, there are places that you're like, okay, I'm feeling out of sorts. What makes me feel okay? Donald Trump, it's that.
Yeah.
And now you open the floodgates and it's also, I think, getting back at people.
Oh, yes.
Now there are no restraints. So he needs that for his own
Mhm.
well-being.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
why I don't understand why people can't accept that that's gonna happen,
Mm.
and we need to figure out how we're going to deal with it,
Right.
not fight the idea to begin with,
Right. Not
which is
right.
what we.
Not like bury deeper in the denial. He won't really do those things. We did that. We've been there. We've seen that movie, guys. We know how that ended. And he also has, in the interest of everything you just said, which is spot on, he really needs to surround himself with the most with reprobates. He needs to surround himself with the kind of people who also have no moral compass, who will also do anything, say anything, both in service of him and that first, obviously first, but in service of whatever it is that they want, whatever instantaneous gratification. With Pete Hegseth is the perfect example. The guy is, I mean, I call him bloomin' onion of awfulness. He is literally like, there, you peel one layer back, you're like, oh my God, there's some more. He is, and his mom's out there saying, I didn't mean it when I said he was an abuser of women. Bullshit. But he surrounds himself with people who can validate what he's doing. They're all doing the wrong thing. None of them have a moral compass or a moral code. And there were still some in his orbit the last time. There will be very few, and those who do remain will probably be chased out, or God forbid, worse. And it is very scary. And again, it is the kind of thing we need to talk about because we need to prepare in whatever ways we possibly can, but also we can get on the phone and lobby those people who still say they are pro-democracy, sitting in positions of power. Like there is that little tiny, like kind of new Republican John, there's John Thune. What
Soon.
is this?
Mhm.
Thune, weird. We're kind of pushing back. They did manage to get Gates gone, but I mean that it's a child sex trafficker. If that's not a red line, don't know what is. It is for now, but I still got it nominated for attorney general. But I mean, we can call them. We can call up the wherever you are, whatever state you're in, call them and say, look, I'm watching. This is not okay. You cannot have Pete Hegseth be at the top of our Department of Defense. I'm going to hold you accountable, and we'll see how much power that has, but it can't hurt. But we can't live in denial. You're exactly right. Like this is coming. Open your eyes. And for those of you who don't see it, some of us are taking up the baton right now, and we're going to be looking at you going, we tried to tell you, but we have to prepare. We have to do whatever we can.
Yeah, I did a column on so basically the parts of the Constitution that Donald Trump just he sees the plays in the play in the joints that no one dared go to, and then
Yeah.
he just bulldozes through them, and then everyone's like, wait a minute, what did he just do? How do we push back? And then all
Yep.
of a sudden that part of the Constitution's gone. Like he did it
Yep.
with the impeachment clause, he did it with the emoluments clause. And the reason I say this, so I put it in my newsletter on my Substack, like what did he do and what could he do the next time, and I got some trolls that responded and said, oh, I'm paraphrasing, you say you're a law professor, don't you realize there's checks and balances and there's other branches? And I think I reason I raise that is it just demonstrates just the lack of civic education, the lack of real understanding about how government works and how precarious we are. I've been living this with this for 9 years, day in and day out, watching very, very, very carefully in a granular way all the various guardrails, and we could talk for what 5 hours about detailed all the Supreme Court cases,
Mm.
the framers, the constitutional underpinnings of it, like all of it, and watching very, very, very carefully. Um, there's nothing left.
Right.
So you might have heard that in your seventh grade civics class, but people aren't, I guess, maybe patient or interested enough in those, or maybe I said something that was hard to hear, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that's more likely it. And I've always thought of him as being able to find the cracks and fissures. And then I think of him as a fungus or a mold because he doesn't even, I don't even, it's like he's looking for them in a concerted effort, intelligent, strategic way. It's just like he just covers it all. And then where the shit falls into the cracks and fissures, he's like, oh, here's one. And then he just busts it wide open. And you're like, but there's a check for that, right? Like there's a,
But
there's,
not
yeah.
maybe.
Right. Like, and then you're like, but he just used the White House for the RNC and that's the whole thing. Like, we have a whole thing for that. And like, now he's not signing this fucking thing. I don't even understand fully, but like, they need to get the transition teams in and it's like the disclosure thing. And he's just like, I'm not even talk about it, let alone sign it. Like, it's completely unprecedented. He has to sign it. And everyone keeps saying, senators, Blumenthal, they're all out there like, he has to sign the thing. He has to sign the thing. He has to sign the thing. Great. How are you going to make him sign the thing? He's going to roll into the White House and you're not going to make him sign the thing. And it's like, in the meantime, we don't know all of the where's money's coming from. We don't. His teams are certainly not up to speed on like national security issues, and everyone's just going, "He has to sign it. He has to sign it." He says, "It's like what? No." Whatever power you have right now, figure it out. Try and take, like, look what they did in North Carolina to the opposite extreme. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, we're about to go out. We better do some, Ohio too, like, to do some shit right now, like bulldoze this. But we're putting our hands up and going, look what he's doing again and again and again. And there are no checks and in place, no mechanisms for oversight. The Supreme Court is another prime example. So, like, this idea that we just keep letting him bulldoze, like you said, the systems in place, those checks and balances, and we could talk about civics education all day long too. That's a whole nother podcast because that is a huge failing on our part as a society. But I mean, the idea of the cracks and fissures and the systems just failing one after another, and I know you've been watching, and it's like you get hitting the alarm, and it's like, well, no, there's another one.
Well, and I think Democrats, they're worried about pushing back that it's going to set some kind of precedent. And now, with the pardon power, like you mentioned, the hypocrisy and just the being blind to the fact that Donald Trump and others before him really have already crossed some kind of line with the pardon. But what I say it is that, when you are moving through these norms, these standards, like, so you're talking about, the transition, there's government for your transition team, money. But in order to get the money, you've got to sign some stuff, including promises to use secure computer programs when you're exchanging government information, right? So what does Donald Trump do? I'm going to get my own money, and who knows who's lining his pockets, how that's going. So now I'm I'm outside the government. I don't want your money. I'm getting it from someone else. So no, I don't have to sign all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, because they were set up with the idea that the transition people would want the money. So they're thinking, oh, to get the money, we'll create an incentive system. To get the money, you're going to have to go along with these rules to protect the American public with respect to the transition money. And he's like, well, just keep your money. And no one thinks about, like, oh my gosh, who would have the audacity to just have, I don't even know who's giving him money, right? And what they're going to expect in exchange once he has all the power, right?
Right.
And then the Democrats say, well, how do we meet this? If we meet this, that would be so outrageous. Do we say we're not giving you the keys to the White House? Does Joe Biden say, listen, I'm not giving you anything until you sign? You're not getting a single thing. That would be outrageous. That would break some norms. But when someone breaks norms, you kind of have to break some norms to meet that moment. And I think about Abraham Lincoln, who he suspended the writ of habeas corpus, which is your right, if you get arrested, to challenge your imprisonment. He suspended that to basically keep a mob from invading Baltimore. It was all part of the Civil War. I'm not an expert in this, but he essentially did something highly unconstitutional, but did it with this broader goal. Like, listen, the house is burning. I'm not an expert. I can't say whether that was right or wrong, but he did meet the moment with this goal of protecting the bigger democratic picture. And Team Trump is not aimed at that. I think the Democrats are, but they're not willing to take the risks and to take the gloves off in the way to save the bigger experiment.
Right. They are the extraordinary times. They are not meeting with extraordinary measures in the way that they could because they're just playing by conventional terms. Because it's an old playbook that Donald Trump's existence ripped it up, burned it, set it on fire, pissed on it, sold the whole thing to Putin. I mean, and the Democrats are like, well, let's have a hearing on this. Let's see what maybe we should, talk about this. It's like
Or not.
yeah,
Where's the
right.
hearing on the $2 billion to this from the Saudis to Jared Kushner? They never
No.
had a hearing on that.
Right, we were too busy having them on Hunter Biden's dick pics. Like, yeah, exactly.
But the
And then
Senate was controlled by the Democrats. They didn't do it either.
that's a very, 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 very good point. By the way, Chuck Schumer gets to be minority leader. And it's like, really? That's the definition of insanity. We just keep lining up behind the same stale, old ideas. No offense to people who are old and stale, but like, what are we doing? Why are the same exact people who set us on this course here that put us here, why are they back in charge? I will never understand this. I just ugh. I have one last question because it's pertinent to pardons with Trump's felonies, and we still don't know, but I mean it's Trump. Can he pardon himself for those? Those are state felonies, right? Are they federal?
Yeah, I mean the two federal cases are gone. So the
Right,
state ones, no, he can't do anything about the
for now.
Manhattan he can't do anything about that conviction
Right. Okay.
at all. I mean, he could maybe not be sentenced. I mean, he
Right.
could maybe persuade the courts in New York till because he's president. Once he's finished for the presidency, he can't do anything about it. And then there's the Georgia one. So no, the pardon doesn't impact any of that. Now, to our other point, could he start bullying the folks that are in those positions and use the federal government, law enforcement threats, IRS threats, surveillance?
He's done it before.
So could he do it that way to get them to back down? And we're in a new world, Joe. We are in a new world. But I want to add one thing to your point, because this has been I know a dark conversation and people listen. I encourage people who are listening to just be patient and watch to see how things go. And then there's a possibility, there's a opportunity with this all of this darkness for a really different way of governing, right? So it isn't going to be the old guard. The old ways were broken with Citizens United when all the money got into politics. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but I think, young people that haven't been engaged, haven't been involved, people that listen to us right now and hear something that makes sense to them, and they're like, this makes sense. They're speaking in a way that, maybe I don't agree with everything they're saying, but I kind of agree with the spirit behind it. We have
Mhm.
to set aside our political differences and find our common humanity and creativity and strength, just
Yep.
like you're talking about with South Korea. And I do think, maybe this is the new 1776, and
Mm.
maybe we're at this gifted moment in human history where we can come together and produce something really much better out of the ashes. It
Mm.
wasn't going to fix itself. I mean, I'll be honest, I voted for Kamala Harris. She wasn't going to, that presidency was not going to fix this. We are going to end up
Mm.
right where we were, or even maybe even worse in 4 years, because
Mm.
that system is just self-perpetuating.
Right.
We do have to come up with something really new. I don't have the answer, but part of me is like, I have optimism and hope
Yeah.
and belief um, in the ingenuity and the courage and the integrity of many, many Americans. And, I have children, you have children. We have technology coming in, we have AI that will shift a lot of things. And maybe we'll see something beautiful on the other side.
Yeah, you know what? I love that message, and I agree with you 1,000%. I say this all the time. I really do believe in the resilience of the human spirit. You and I both walk the walk and talk the talk. We understand this better than a lot of people. Like I've said, I don't know how to build a grassroots. I don't know how to build a grassroots organization. I don't know how to organize. I don't know how to do any of that things, but I do know how to rise from ashes, and I know that you do
I do
too.
too.
And we and I do believe that you're exactly right, and that this might be that moment where everything kind of gets burned down to the ground. That sounds so grim, but in sort of the wake of that, the response to that is the thing that we really can lean into that doesn't require anything is our human spirits, our connections to each other on a human level. And when human beings are oppressed and when they're being held down and they're being subjected to, cruelty, they find a way to find each other. And I think what they can build together will be stronger than anything that's pre-existed, because that's usually the pendulum swing. That response is usually stronger, and this is going to be pretty. I joke I'm like why I'm smiling. It's an awkward smile, but like I say all the time, this is going to fucking suck. This is going to be hell. This is going to be dark. And if you face true darkness, which we have talked about at length personally, if you face true darkness, you know how black that can feel. But you also know that it's not the end. It's dark as it ever can feel, there is still a path. And the way through, I believe, well, first of all, the only way out is through, but you have to find those people that are right there beside you. And then you do the walk together. It sucks. It's dark. It's scary. It's never the end. I just fundamentally believe that.
You and I, yeah, we sing off the same page, and it's from personal experience. And I tell my kids this, in the blackest black, find the light. There's just find that pinprick of light and go towards that.
Yeah.
And in the days that you just, you feel completely defeated, just know in the next 24 hours, you got to stagger to your feet.
Yeah.
You might not feel good staggering to your feet. You still might be weeping. You still might be, but get back up. Just get back up. Get back up. Doesn't mean get back up and sail away, to the promised land.
No.
Just get up. Just get up.
Yep.
Get up.
Yep.
Just get up. That's what yeah, it's not like it's not going to get bad. That's what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Denying the reality of it doesn't help, actually.
No.
Ultimately,
Right.
it'll come for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're survivors like us and I don't know, fighters or warriors, whatever it is, and people, I think, who have gone through things and held on to our soul and our integrity and our sense of right and wrong, right? It's very, very empowering. And if that's the movement, that's the spirit, that's the energy that I think that I think could be really, really fantastic.
And I think I can already feel it kind of gurgling, but not too far beneath the surface. Because when you write things, when I write things, they take a tone that's very much in line with what we're saying, and the response, not the trolls, but the response largely is, I needed to hear this. I didn't know I was here. This is where I am. Because what you can't tell someone is, yes, it's going to be bleak. You're fucked forever. Because that's not ever true. But you also can't say, oh, it's going to be fine. You don't need to worry. What you need to say is what we just said. It's going to suck. We're going to go through it, and we're going to go through the suck. And then we're going to emerge on the other side stronger. And but we have to get through it first.
Yeah, and take my hand.
Yes. Yes.
Take my hand in the darkness. There's some of us that can, help a little, help each other, but there is guidance. There is a path. It's not the lies. It's not the capitalists. It's not the corporations. It's not the oligarchs. It's not the politicians. It's not.
No, and it never has been throughout the course of human history. It's never been. I mean, we've seen it in society after society that's fallen. You see the rise of the resilience of people. It is going to be us. And it's going to take some time. It's going to be fucking hard work. It's going to take a long time. But you know what? Nothing was ever built in a day that really was lasting or sustaining. And this shit all needed to be changed a long time ago. It's like the carpet's bad, the wood paneling, it needs to go. Time for some updates. Okay, so
That's true.
It's like, I mean, we all had that one basement where you're like, oh, it's so nostalgic. And now it's really musty. And you're like,
Yes.
is it time? It feels
Yes.
like it's time.
Yeah. So true.
we need to rethink this plan. But I'm so grateful as always for your conversation. What I love about this conversation about you, about the connection I've made with you, is it is the intersection of all of the very important, obviously, legal stuff, the government stuff, the civic stuff, but that component of humanity and survival and resilience. I keep coming back to that word, relentlessness, like, getting up when you don't want to. That's what is so wonderfully unique and special and magical about you, and something that I was like, we are kindred spirits.
We are. I feel the same way. It's shine your light, folks. Turn it on and shine it. We all have that energy, and I feel that with you too. So we'll keep this conversation going for sure. It would be a gift to me.
We will definitely keep this conversation going so long as Enrique Tario doesn't come to my door. I'm just
Oh,
kidding.
well, I'm going to get in my car, man, and head up to where you are if that happens.
Let's go.
I have to face both of us.
Exactly. I'm gonna put my war paint on, and yeah, I'll hit him with my. I could do some damage with a wooden spoon because that's my weapon of choice. Okay, so again, wonderful conversation. We definitely will keep these conversations going in all the different sort of components of it. The emotional one, the supportive one, also the hair on fire fucking shit is crazy one, but the keeping an eye on what's going on, 1000%. The book is Pardon Power: How the Pardon System Works and Why. Kim Whaley, amazing to talk to you as always. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. And everybody, where can they go to check out more of your Substack?
Yeah, so my Substack's called Simple Politics, and twice a week I break down in Q&A format all basically the main legal questions of the week, translated for non-lawyers. But it's all of it. It's on my website, kimwhaley.com, WEHLE. And
Awesome.
I actually am off Twitter because I just couldn't I couldn't do it anymore. But I'm on Blue Sky and Threads and Instagram, all at Kim Whaley.
Awesome. Yeah, I am still there, slugging it out. It's horrible, but like I don't know what it is. I'm too fucking stubborn. I'm like I like poking them in the face. I'm fucking punching them, poking them, and then they tell me they're gonna kill me. That's how that goes. It's
Oh, you're
fine.
such a brave soul. Yeah.
Like
Well,
we talk about this. I've seen worse than you. Believe me. Like you sit there behind your keyboard telling me I'm a fat fucking 8:30 in the morning. And you're gonna kill me. I've seen worse than you. I promise.
the bullies are insecure.
Yes,
At the end of the
exactly.
day,
Yeah.
if you were confident in yourself, you wouldn't need to bully and put other people down.
Exactly. And they're always
Mhm.
telling on themselves because they know that the only way that they can do anything is to scare you. Well, again, thank you so much. Everybody,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thanks.
Yeah.
This concludes this episode.